Jewish pirates of the Caribbean. It says here how a generation of swashbuckling Jews carved out an empire in the New World in their quest for treasure, religious freedom, and revenge. Edward Kritzler. Prologue. A puzzling entry in a pirate journal jumped out at me. Invading Jamaica in 1643, William Jackson found the island's capital deserted, except for diverse Portuguese of the Hebrew nation who came up onto us seeking asylum and promised to show us where the Spaniards hid their gold. All right, so you see what's going on? I had always learned that early New World adventure was the province of Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors, and that they were all devout Catholics carrying the cross. So what were Portuguese Jews doing on a Spanish island seeking asylum with an English pirate? All right, so he's like, so what's going on? Why is this Portuguese Jew who's supposed to be Portuguese, why ain't he siding with his Portuguese Catholic people? Why is he actually beefing with them and actually seeking asylum with an English pirate? And again, an English pirate, remember, these Sephardic Jews, these Moors, these Huguenots, they were traveling all over Europe and settling in places like England, Ireland, Holland, and becoming English, Irish, Dutch. So it says it was 1967. I had moved to Jamaica from New York and came upon Jackson's journal in the reading room of Jamaica's National Library. While perusing contemporary accounts of the island's buccaneer beginnings, I was more than intrigued. I wanted an answer. What I next learned was startling. All right, what he learned was startling. Before England conquered Jamaica in 1655, the island belonged to the family of Christopher Columbus, who provided a haven for Jews. All right, Jamaica was what? A haven for Sephardic, Moorish, European people of color. The leader of the Jewish community, the late Sir Neville Asherheim, went even further, telling me that Columbus was a Jew and that Jamaica's Jews trace their ancestry to the first settlers. So again, we got another person from another place telling us Columbus was a so-called Jew. All right, Sephardi, Moorish Jew. Yeah, he was a person of color. Columbus was not his name. It says, I was so beguiled by these findings that I would spend the next 4 decades following their lead and unfolding an unknown chapter in Jewish history. Forget the merchants of Venice. His New World cousins were adventurers after my own heart. Jewish explorers, conquistadors, cowboys, and yes, pirates. Forbidden to settle the New World, they came disguised as Christians. Remember, they were being called New Christians, but they were crypto secret Jews, Moors, Moriscos, and Marranos. They came disguised as Christians. They and other settlers were similar in spirit, but while the others came to conquer, convert the heathen, search for gold, or collect a bevy of Indian women, the Jews came to escape persecution and settle a land beyond the tentacles of the Inquisition. The story begins with Columbus and the Age of Discovery, when secret Jews sailed with the explorers, marched with the conquistadors, and were among the first settlers in every New World colony. Again, they were what? Amongst the first settlers. This early history is largely unknown because few then or since realized that these pioneers were Jewish. I told you, these pioneers were Jewish. Iberian Jews posed as new Christians from Portugal. Again, Iberian Jews posed as new Christians from Portugal. All right, the one settler group that was not required to prove their Catholic ancestry. Most Portuguese operating in the Spanish Empire were new Christians. Again, most Portuguese, all of them, commonly called conversos, and many maintained their allegiance to their ancestral faith. They were esperandos, hopeful ones, who expected that the Messiah would soon come and that he, like them, would appear in the guise of a Christian and so forgive their apostasy. Oh, really? That's what they thought? Oh, really? I don't think that's all what they all thought, but that's even that is a little funny, right? Until then, whatever it would take to get by in the enemy world was not deceit, but strength. As Esperantos, Jews in the New World lived and prospered. Unless exposed by the Inquisition, they went to their graves with their masquerade intact. Though, even death offered no assurance, as dead heretics were tried in absentia. If found guilty, their bodies were exhumed and burnt and their property confiscated. Wow. Arriving first as explorers and conquistadors, they and the Jewish pioneers who followed soon focused on a field of expertise that had sustained them and made them welcome in the diaspora. A mercantile people, Jews in the New World went about their business as traders and ship owners, thus becoming the first merchant class in the Spanish Empire. As long as they pretended to be Christian and delivered the goods, no one questioned their religiosity too closely. They set up the first sugar factories. Who set up the first sugar factories and plantations? Sugar, right? Sugar factory, sugar, slavery, right? Plantation system. Kunta Kinte, right? They told us they brought Africans and they told us it was white people creating all this stuff. But it was actually Sephardic, people of color, Jews, Iberians who set up the first sugar factories, pioneered grain, coffee, and tea cultivation, and traded sugar, tobacco, right? Tobacco, remember the Indians, the Dutch tobacco companies and the Indians, the pictures of the Indians, the tobacco Indians. Who was doing all that? Also people of color. Gold and silver with covert Jews of the Iberian Peninsula. Covert. They had their networks set up over in Europe still. So they had a great network going back and forth with their covert family members back in the Iberian Peninsula. Covert, secret, undercover, covert, not in the open. First profits to the homeland were the underpinning of the mercantile system. Everything to and from the New World had to go via Seville or Lisbon. For most of the 16th century, the parties were content with the trade-off. The king needed the Jews to ensure his cash flow, all right? So they needed these people to handle the trade for them, to make sure the money and all of the commerce, the economy is going. They're handling the accounting and all that, right? And they needed him, the king of Portugal, who was a Catholic, right? Catholic empire, to keep the Inquisition at bay. However, once the trade network was established, Jews became expendable. At the close of the 16th century, Inquisition fires caught up with them in Mexico and Peru, where Jewish merchants controlled the silver trade. Holy inquisitors were called in to purify the bottom line. Jewish leaders were burned. All right, well, there we go. We're going to get descriptive. Their wealth was confiscated, and Christians took over the fabulously rich silver trade. New World Jews got the message. More than profit, their survival in the coming century would require a haven outside the reach of the Grand Inquisitor. Unable to secure a homeland on their own, covert Jews conspired with Holland. Covert Jews, right? Sephardic, Moorish people, cryptos. They got together with Holland. Dutch, we already know that was another haven. That was the New Jerusalem. Remember, we've already covered all this. And you know how prominent these same people, these covert Jews, were already in Holland and England to seize a New World colony. It was then that a handful of Dutch Jews, so we got covert Jews, New World Jews, Dutch Jews, it's all the same people. All right, all Sephardic, Iberian, Moorish, crypto, Marrano, Moriscos, by a warrior rabbi. Says it was then that a handful of Dutch Jews, inspired by a warrior rabbi, took it upon themselves to change things. Their generation came of age in the early 1600s when Jews were forbidden in England, France, and most of Europe. And in the Spanish Empire, anyone caught Judaizing was liable to be burned. Only in Amsterdam could Jews safely call themselves such. And they grew up strong and free in a city that became known in the diaspora as New Jerusalem, like I just said earlier. So Holland, who are Dutch really? Who the Black Dutch? Only in Amsterdam could Jews safely call themselves such. That's where they were. That's their spot right there. Their mentors were their refugee parents. who settled there on the run from the Inquisition, and their rabbi, the pirate Samuel Palachi. Most of the community's 50 or so families were elite merchants from Spain and Portugal. Merchants, remember who the merchants were, whose skills and connections had made them welcome in what was fast becoming Europe's trading capital. Rabbi Palachi, a Barbary pirate who was still capturing Spanish ships in the late 60s, while the aim of their parents was to live freely, grow wealthy on the New World trade, and have their portraits painted by Rembrandt. Their ultimate goal was nothing less than to bring down the Spanish Empire. They wanted to bring that down. The Spanish Empire, the Catholic Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. Their proxy armies in the struggle were the Dutch, the English, and in the final successful assault, the buccaneers of the West Indies. Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean is the history of the Sephardic Jews. All right? Okay. I told you guys. All right? Once you get into true, correct history, everything starts coming together. All right? Because the Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, all right? Forget the Toltec Jewish. Pirates of the Caribbean is the history of Sephardic Jews in the early New World, okay? That whole movie, that was them. Involving intrigue, horror, defeat, survival, and final victory over the hooded inquisitors of the Holy Terror, the Holy Roman Empire. It concludes with their last hurrah, their search for the legendary lost gold mine of Columbus. After achieving a Jewish rights in Europe and the New World, 3 Dutch Jews, accompanied by their sons, went into the mountains of Jamaica to find Columbus' mine. They reported that their search was not successful, but I found their map and have reason to believe it was. All right, so now we're going to continue on the introduction of this book. It says, on August 1st, 1492, when Christopher Columbus set sail for the New World, ethnic cleansing was the order of the day. 100,000 Jews left Spain, expelled as mandated by the royal edict of expulsion of the Jews. Those who remained behind or crossed the border to Portugal converted to Catholicism. The more adventurous went on to the New World. It is about this group that our story is told. Long before Spain was Spain, all right, before it was called Spain, Jews were living there. Sephardic Jews were there. King Solomon trading post 1000 BC, all right, dodge the hijack. They already messed with our chronologies, throwing us back 3,000 years, 1,000 years, 300 years. Get the word from Anatoly Fomenko. But either way, they're letting you know that Spain was a trading post, all right? And that these Jews were handling it. Developed over the millennium to become Sephard, a strategic outpost of the Roman Empire. It was there in the 5th century AD that Emperor Titus, after conquering Israel and burning the temple, exiled thousands of Jews. Although the Jews of Sephard flourished, they were always tenants. The Visigoths who replaced the Romans made it illegal for them to own land, and Spain's subsequent rulers, the Vandals, the Moors, and Catholics, found it expedient to continue the ban. Despite this and other restrictions, the tribe of Moses grew and prospered. In Spain's feudal society, Jews were an educated elite, a merchant class also respected as physicians and financiers. At the end of the 14th century, after some 1,500 years of residence, the 500,000 Jews of Sephard, half the Jews of Europe, and I would say it was more probably, represented the oldest and largest Jewish community outside Palestine. Their leaders boasted lineage to King David and considered themselves the aristocracy of Jewry. These were halcyon days for a people who were unwelcome in most Europe. But their very prosperity and superior lifestyle were resented or presented by an educated mass whose all-consuming religious beliefs could be inflamed by virulent anti-Semitism. Ferran Martinez, a fire in Seville, provided the spark following a frenzied sermon in which he accused Jews of everything from causing the Black Plague to killing Christians, children, and drinking their blood. He incited the crowd to rise up and destroy this accursed race. Descending on Seville's Jewish quarter, the rabble slaughtered 4,000 men, women, and children. What is known in Jewish history as the Massacre of 1391 had commenced. Pogroms spread from city to city. The mob's ammunition, convert or die, resulted in 100 dead Jews and 100,000 converts for Jesus. After a bloody year, peace was gradually restored. Spain's 300,000 remaining Jews came forth from hiding places and reconstructed their lives. Those who remained faithful continued to live as Jews, but under a host of restrictions. But the 100,000 converted Jews freed from religious bondage rose over the next century to positions of power that had been denied them as Jews, called conversos or new Christians, to distinguish them from the dominant old Christians. They achieved major positions in government, the army, and universities, and married into the highest nobility, all right? So they weren't doing so bad always. They were prominent at court and in the hierarchy of the church. However, conversion by coercion rather than conviction had an unforeseen consequence. Forced baptism had brought infidels into the church, but in doing so created heretics within. In the last decades of the 15th century, there began what came to be called the Holy Terror. Queen Isabella vowed she would root out all heretics from her kingdom once the Catholic reconquest of Spain from the Moors was complete. Meanwhile, she would begin by rerouting our heretics in Seville, a city known for Jews pretending to be Christians. Her means was to auto the fe, act of faith, the church's idea of judgment day on earth, with a grand inquisitor playing God. Wow. In 1482, Isabella gave that role to her confessor Thomas de Torquemada. In the course of his 18th-year reign, the former Dominican friar personally condemned 9,000 Jews to the stake at the Quemadero burning ground outside the city walls. Wow, Torquemada. So we got all his historic books. He got first-hand accounts because he was over here in the Americas dealing with the Indians. That's funny because he was even saying that they had Jewish and they were the lost tribes of Israel. But then he's over here condemning thousands of Jews in Spain outside the city walls. He also exhumed the bodies of 7,000 dead heretics and burned their remains. Whenever Torquemada appeared in public, he was accompanied by 50 agents on horseback and 200 armed guards. You hear that? 10 years later, on the very day Columbus set sail, Spain's monarchs banished her Jews to purify and thereby unite their nation. Jews settled everywhere they were permitted and disguised. That's Portuguese new Christian. Disguised. All right, what else did they become disguised as? Protestants, right? Dutch, English, Irish, Black Dutch. Right? These were crypto Jews, crypto Muslims. Remember, it wasn't just Jews they banished from Spain. It was the Jews and Moors. They became, both of them, new Christians, but they really weren't. Along with other pioneers in the far-off New World, they carved out a niche for themselves, living possibly the most original experience the world has ever known. They thought themselves safe, but the white-hooded inquisitors soon followed. In the 16th and 17th centuries, thousands of New World conversos were arrested, tortured, and tried. Found guilty, they saw their wealth confiscated and they were first flogged, then imprisoned, strangled, burned, or condemned either to work in the salt mines of Venezuela. Again, who was they sending to work in the salt mines of Venezuela? Thousands of these Sephardic, Moorish, all right, people of color, conversos, new Christians, disguised crypto Muslims and crypto Jews were arrested, tortured, and found guilty, right? And what happened? They were condemned to work in the salt mines of Venezuela or to row galley ships across the Pacific, a sentence from which none returned. They were the ones at the bottom. It wasn't no African slaves. You see what's going on? Go research that. I bet you they're going to say it was Negroes or Africans. And they're not going to mention anything about Sephardic Jews or Muslim Moors going over there, new Christians. Inquisitors were thorough in their questioning of heretics, and the trial transcripts offer an intimate look into the condemned Judaizers' secret lives. During the day, they went about as exemplary Catholics, attended Mass, went to confession and had their children baptized. But on certain nights they met secretly in one another's homes, all right, secretly reverted to Hebrew names and read from the Torah. History would come to call these secret Jews Marranos and Moriscos, meaning pigs, though this term has generally lost its pejorative meaning. I prefer to call them what they call themselves in the sanctity of their homes, Jews. Each New World colony had an underground community of Jews known only to one another and their brethren in other colonies, all right? Secret communities. Together, conversos in the New World dominated commerce. They dominated commerce. Who was doing the trade? The merchants. Who was in charge of all that? Again, in the 16th century, when the known world doubled in size and international trade became big business, they established a trade network that spanned the globe. In Lima, Peru, the Inquisition reported the city is thick with Jews. Everything goes through their hands, from brocade to sackcloth, diamonds to cumin seeds, to the most precious pearl and the vilest Guinea black. In Potosi, Bolivia, with the Silver Mountain, the Inquisitors reported the silver trade is almost exclusively in the hands of the crypto Jews. All right, so who's really the owners? Who's really these slave masters? In Potosi, especially, read about that mountain they got all the silver from. All right, and mainly it was American Indians, other people of color who they were put into slave there. Who was running that? Crypto Jews. In Port Royal, Jamaica, English merchants protested. Descendants of the crucifiers of blessed Jesus, eat us and our children out of all trade. They purchased the entire cargo of a trading ship, divided according to paid shares, and distributed goods through agents in each of the colonies. In concert with their fellow Jews scattered worldwide by the Sephardic diaspora, they formed a global tribe of inside traders, bonded by heritage, language, and hatred for Spain or the Roman Empire. New World Jews traded with covert brethren on the Iberian Peninsula and later sold directly to Jews in Amsterdam and London, often in ships leased from Jewish ship owners in Amsterdam and Antwerp. It's all connected. They're all family. They're all doing business together. Who's the Dutch? Who's the Spanish? Who's these Jews? Who's the Portuguese? Who's the French? You got to start really asking questions and really doing research and stop generalizing. Dealing with the people of the book was very attractive. Their innovative letters of exchange and credit made capital portable. For instance, a shipping merchant trading in pirate waters doubled his risk if he returned with gold. On the other hand, if he could leave the gold and return instead with a draft on a Jewish banking house, he was safe. As a link in a world trade network, at the onset of international trade, Jewish merchants, these Jewish, Sephardic, Moorish Jews, Jewish people of color, were the world's most coveted capitalists, They were the world's most coveted capitalists. The historian of capitalism, Fernand Braudel, writes, "It has too quickly been assumed Jews did not invent capitalism. Certainly, they participated wholeheartedly in its beginnings. If they didn't invent it, they were the ones who really started that, capitalism." All right? It is not unrealistic to refer to the 17th century as the age of the great Jewish merchants. All tags. We're talking about Sephardic, Iberians, Moorish people of color, right? Piracy was another lucrative area of commerce in which these Jewish merchants specialized. They were the pirates. Questions of morality did not apply. It was the normal business of every nation to license mercenaries, Licensed mercenaries, privateers, They were hiring these people to seize and rob enemy ships and share the proceeds. The only difference with the Jews was they did not have to license their freebooters. In coded correspondence with fellow merchants and other colonies, they were able to ascertain what ship was sailing when, its cargo, route, and destination, and what its captain may have secreted in his cabin. Thus informed, the Jewish merchants were the brains behind the brawn, financing, advising, and sometimes leading the Caribbean's emergent fighting force. All right, they were the ones doing every part of it. A ragtag crew of misfits of every nation that coalesced as the dreaded pirates of the Spanish Main. From many nations, all right, but they were all what? They were all what? Cryptos, Iberian cryptos. A president for this unholy alliance was set by fellow Sephardim in North Africa, all right, in North Africa, a Sephardim from North Africa who had assured their welcome among the Moors by profitably backing and sometimes leading the Barbary pirates. These people were all together, see? Sinan, Barbarossa's second in command, was referred to in crown correspondence with England's Henry VII as the Great Jewish Pirate, and the brothers Samuel and Joseph Palachi would go from commanding pirates to founding Amsterdam's Jewish community. You hear that? That's a big one. They were so successful and they became so prominent, right? They ended up what? Founding Amsterdam's Jewish community, New Jerusalem. These pirates founding New Jerusalem. Pirates founding New Jerusalem. All right. In the first decades of the 17th century, rival Christian merchants, wanting a share of the fabulous wealth being generated by trade in the New World, sought to expose the conversos as heretics before the holy office of the Inquisition. So you understand, they wanted a piece of the pie. The Holy Roman Empire was like, yo, man, they're making a lot of money over there off our lands, right? We're the ones in charge, right? So let's just go kick them off. Let's take their trade. Let's call them heretics so we can condemn them. Like saying, oh, he's a terrorist, patriot act. Let's go get him, right? Oh, they're heretics. Let's go. We got the right and the authority to go grab them, confiscate their land, put them to work in plantations or salt mines or to row ships, right? Do whatever. We take their trade. We take their whole business. Thus threatened covert Jews beginning in 1620s conspired with Holland and England to seize a New World colony. Writing in code to agents in Europe, they proposed to serve as a fifth column in the body of the enemy. They are good and useful spies, said a confidant of Oliver Cromwell, regarding the Jews who advised Cromwell in the conquest of Jamaica. The conquest of Jamaica by the Jews. Sephardic Moorish, crypto Jews. Positioned to assist Spain's enemies, they did. Jewish trade links cultivated since 1492 when Sephardim settled the far corners of the globe, doubled as a worldwide intelligence network. You hear what's going on, all right? They took over. From the time Jews in Portugal got word to Queen Elizabeth that the Armada was sailing, they shared secret intelligence with the enemies of Spain. Jews had been outlawed from living in France since 1394 and from England since 1290. However, when those two nations and Holland settled a dozen small, uninhabited Caribbean islands between 1624 and 1635, Jews were welcome. Their connections and knowledge of New World trade were indispensable to the success of the new colonies, and they spoke the language. Who else but Sephardic merchants could better pursue illegal trade with the Spanish colonies, huh? How else could these small settlements survive? How would they have survived if it wasn't for these Iberian people, Moorish people? The islands constituted mere footholds in what was called the New Spanish Sea. Together they totaled less than 1,500 square miles, while the Spanish New World encompassed millions. Continuing says here, the first openly Jewish settlement in the New World was in Brazil. All right, so we got this info on past videos. You know, we know Brazil, there were so many of these Sephardic Moorish people were being persecuted, ended up in Brazil, and basically were the pioneers. They settled in many towns and colonies in Brazil. In 1624, the Dutch captured Brazil's capital, Bahia, from Portugal with an invasion force that included several dozen declared Jews. The invaders were assisted by local conversos who had gotten word that an Inquisition office was to be established in their province, where 200 of them were living as counterfeit Christians, fake Christians, right? A year later, King Philip IV of Spain sent a 12,000-man army and temporarily threw the Dutch out. Afterwards, the Inquisitors report charged secret Jews, had written Holland and asked the Dutch to liberate them, had initiated plans for the invasion and agreed to share its cost. The heretics had suckled at the breast of the Mother Church, and when the Dutch came, openly professed the Jewish faith. So they were only Christians. They were playing that out. It was an act. As soon as the Dutch got there to Brazil, they were like, all right, we're Jews, all right? We get to be Jews again. In 1630, Holland's forces again invaded, landed north of Bahia. They conquered Recife and surrounding provinces in northeast Brazil. So the Dutch took it back from the Portuguese Christians or Catholic Empire. Under Dutch protection, a Jewish community thrived there for 24 years. They called their congregation Sur Israel, Rock of Israel, marketed sugar and taxed Jewish privateers, 3% of their booty. Sugar and piracy transformed Recife into the richest trading port in the New World outside of Havana. And Jews, integral participants in both industries, lived a high life. Their favorite pastimes may be glimpsed from what they outlawed. Synagogue leaders banned card playing on Friday afternoon, as too many members missed Sabbath service, and levied whooping fines on members caught taking Christian women into the mikvah, the ritual bath. The situation in Brazil was unique. Elsewhere in the New World, as the mid-century approached, the long-established secret Jewish communities in Peru and Mexico came to a flaming end, with each found guilty of a great conspiracy. In 1638, hundreds of Peru's Jews were arrested. Their leaders, accused of plotting to blow up Lima's harbor in advance of a Dutch invasion, were burned at the stake. In 1640s, Mexico's Jews were charged for conspiring to burn down the house of the Inquisition. And by 1650, the methods of the Inquisition, the dungeon, the rack, the stake, marked a decade-long succession of autos de fe that decimated the Mexican community. In both countries, the heretics' wealth was equally divided between the crown and the inquisitors, and their property was auctioned off to old Christians. In 1654, a similar end threatened the congregants of the Rock of Israel when Portugal reconquered Recife. So Portugal again came back to Brazil, where the Dutch had power in 1654, and now they were in trouble again, the Sephardi Moorish people there, right? Because the Catholics were back in town. After 24 years, the only legal Jewish community in the New World was no more. All right, so they were there for 24 years. Jews were given 3 months to leave or be turned over to the Inquisition. The destruction of brethren communities in Mexico and Peru convinced the refugees the New World was again off limits. They departed Recife on 16 ships. The 15 that sailed for Holland arrived safely. The ship that went north to New Amsterdam did not. This ship ran into a storm that by the adverse drove it into Jamaica's enemy waters, where it was seized. The islands was home to a secret Jewish community called Portuguese, the Gauls, who had been living as merchants and traders since Columbus' son had settled in the island in 1510. The Columbus family owned Jamaica, and in deference to their converso settlers, had kept the island out of bounds to the Inquisition. But when the identity of the Dutch refugees became known, Jamaica's leaders, looking to oust the Columbus family, used the arrival of these suspect heretics to invite inquisitors from Colombia to Jamaica. Fearing an investigation of the refugees might lead to their own exposure, Jamaica's Portuguese, right? So they were there deep hiding. They were in secret. They were like, oh man, now these people from Brazil brought us heat. Because now they're going to investigate them. Now they're going to investigate us too. We've been here for years. And we've been secret Jews. All right? They were just known as Portugals. So they sent a note to Cromwell's agent. Jamaica could be conquered with little resistance, and they pleaded their assistance. The following year, a Jew from Nevis led 36 English ships into the harbor, and 2 local Jews negotiated and signed a peace treaty surrendering the island to England. The treaty exiled the Spanish, and Cromwell invited Jamaica's Portuguese to stay as openly as Jews. All right, so you hear the whole background as why and how Jamaica became a territory of England, and it had mainly and only and basically almost all entirely due to the fact that the Jews were living there, Sephardic Jewish Moorish people, and so they needed help from the England to get them out. So they made a treaty with England. All right, we'll do business. Let's stay here. Kick out the Catholic Empire from here. Welcomed by the English, Jews from all over the New World shed their converso cloaks and emigrated to Jamaica. Jamaica, Jamaica. Yeah. Knowing the history there, knowing the thousands of Jews that fled there, and there were thousands of them who were people of color. These same Jews had inheritance and descendants who were hundreds and hundreds of thousands, right? They multiply. And then eventually, you know, the whole Africa out of Africa, and the Kunta Kinte story comes in, and then you forget, you know, like this book said in the beginning, an unknown part of history, especially here in Jamaica. Jews from all over the New World shed their converso cloaks. They don't have to hide anymore, and they immigrated to Jamaica. The community soon included ship owners from Mexico and Brazil, traders from Peru and Colombia, and ship captains and pilots from Nevis and Barbados. All right, they set up shop in Jamaica. These Moorish, Jewish, crypto Jews, crypto Muslims. Together, their knowledge of New World trade was unsurpassed. By 1660, Jamaica had become the Jews' principal haven in the New World. Jamaica, all right, Rastafari, tribe of Judah, where they getting all that influence from, huh? Unlike the small, isolated isles in the Eastern Caribbean, Jamaica was a major island in the middle of the shipping lanes, an ideal base from which to strike at Spanish shipping and well positioned to engage in contraband trade with the Spanish Main. Soon after the English conquest, Jamaica's Jews convinced the island's new leaders that the best way to defend the colony and have it prosper was to invite the pirates of the Caribbean to move there. The pirates of the Caribbean, Jack Sparrow and all of them, right? Johnny Depp and all of them, right? The pirates of the Caribbean. Hey, welcome. All right, who were these pirates of the Caribbean? Again, Moorish Jews, Moorish Muslims, cryptos. The Spanish will think twice about attacking Jamaica if its principal port was the home base of the feared buccaneers of the West Indies, the Buccaneers. Buccaneers. In return for a safe harbor, these pirates, the Brethren of the Coast, that's what they called themselves, look at that, became Jamaica's defense force, and piracy its principal industry. You see, there's a background to all of this, and it has to do with people of color, these Iberian people, Sephardic, this whole Inquisition, the whole diaspora of the Jews and Moors from Spain. In the 1660s, Port Royal, with its wealthy Jewish merchants, ship owners, and synagogue, was known as the treasure house of the Indies, for all the booty brought there, catering to a transient pirate population with one bar and brothel for every 8 persons. The pirate capital acquired a reputation of the world's wickedest city, the pirate capital, all right? Port Royal, the pirate capital in Jamaica, because of Sephardic Moorish people. The wickedest city, pirate capital. Within 15 years, pirate raids from Jamaica on the Spanish Main, organized and financed by the merchants of Port Royal, broke the back of the Spanish Empire. In Henry Morgan, the Jews found their Joshua. In Henry Morgan, the Jews found what? Their savior, their Joshua, their deliverer, right? Not savior, but deliverer. The ones who were going to deliver them, right? The Buccaneer Admiral's 6 raids on Spanish ports, culminating in the burning of the Golden City of Panama, brought the Spanish Empire to its knees. Henry Morgan helped all these people. In the Treaty of Madrid in 1670, Spain acceded to Europe's right to settle the New World. All right, the Jews were finally free to be Jews, right? The 17th century commenced with Jews outlawed in most of Europe and the New World. It ended with their freedom. The participants in their liberation struggle are known. They were the children of refugees from the Inquisition, children of refugees, people of color fleeing, refuge from Inquisition, who in the early 1600s, after having lived underground, their lives in Spain and Portugal. After being underground in Spain and Portugal, settled in Amsterdam, accepted by the Dutch as a valued merchant class, they raised their children in the free air of Holland. They became Dutch, right? Where a select group of them, following the example of their warrior rabbi, took it upon themselves to change things. Over the course of a half a century of leadership, 1623 to 75, they invaded the New World, battled the Inquisition, and orchestrated their people's freedom. All right? A tale. There's a happy ending. Warriors, triumphant people, right? All right, but what about the indigenous people of America? All right? Again, this was not about color. These were people of color. And in their pursuit of freedom, they did take over a lot of the land over here. So it's not about complexion. It's not about hating these people or saying, oh, you guys are invaders or anything. But it's just history. You know, we got to acknowledge every part of our ancestry and genealogy. All right, so that was the prologue and the introduction of this book.